Let's record, I think.
Yeah, I'm cool.
We are recording. You press it.
It is now being recorded.
Okay, it's recorded. So thank you and welcome. And Brian, take it away.
All right. Okay. All right. I see the inception, and I got some slides. People see my slides? Great. Okay. Yeah, so just going to try to give a quick overview of all the things that happened related to the generic Drupal web components project. I think we made some really great progress. And also anybody who, worked on some of this stuff, if you want to jump in and provide any color commentary, feel free. So we had a lot of people who got involved in some capacity or helped in some way, which is really, really awesome. And if I forgot somebody, I am so sorry. But it's great to see so many people that were able to chip in some way. In general, it seemed like it was easy for people to get up and running. So that's awesome. And then we did a bunch of stuff. So we actually touched 14 issues, fixed 6 of them, created 5 new issues. There were 10 credits assigned, and there's 5 that will be assigned when some open issues close. 5 committers, and there'll be 3 more when the few lingering patches are added, and it was all very fun. But yeah, again, I think this is a lot of great progress. And then can just talk through some of the things that we did accomplish. So one really cool addition is that we enabled Lighthouse branch previews on the project with Tugboat. And Joe, this is an example that has a live preview. Joe, who I'm not sure if he's here, but he added this. And we also got some feedback from the Tugboat team because we really weren't sure if, essentially just running a node server for this was, something that's intended for the contrib projects with Tugboat. But it works great. So every time a merge request is open, there's a live preview now. It'll take a second to spin back up, but it is just our storybook. So, same as the documentation, but you can see the current state of any of the components, which is super helpful. And that actually made it easier to test people's patches. Very cool. Whoops, did that
Very
again.
Cool.
And then we did fix, a handful of people helped out fixing a bug. When we started using the really large Drupal wiki data set that Joe put together, there were some problems, but we fixed that bug. This is it running locally. So now, and this also was a chance to show something else that we added. So we added click to expand for menu trees. But now we can see the menu here with all of the different sections. I think I clicked on a link there. What do you know? A link actually worked. Oh, it's not running. Let me go here. But yeah, get the picture there. So yeah, there was some bad logic kind of at the top of the tree, but now we can see this entire really elaborate menu. Let's see what else. There was the expand and collapse for parent menu items. We also added a loading state for these components. I think I'll have to throttle my connection to be able to show it. So here, while it's hitting the API, it renders loading and then displays the menu. And then there's also a slot for it in the component. So in this example, we're overriding slots. You'll see there's a bunch of emojis around the loading icon. So that could be overridden to disable any sort of loading indicator. You could put an animation in there, whatever. Let's see, there's also an issue where there was a good start on basic styling. So there's an initial patch for that. And it also kind of inspired some discussion yesterday about really what the right approach to styling for these components is and how we want to expose different styled variations of the menu, but still keeping it something that can be easily overridden. So there's definitely more discussion and adjustments to happen there, but a good start. And obviously that's a really important piece of this because it's really boring to just see unordered lists all the time. And then we also had a couple of other cases where we worked with these components and repurposed them. So I added this showcase page here. The first example, there's the web component being used in a React app. I think the easiest way to show this actually is in my local environment here with this running. It doesn't look like much, it looks like the exact same thing, and that's kind of the point. It's literally just this web component used inside a React component. The code's up on GitHub if anybody wants to take a look, but there really wasn't anything all that special that had to happen. You just had to import the component and then use the custom element, which is totally the idea here. And then one other thing. So I also spent a little bit of time, I think my connection is still throttled. I probably want to turn that off. I wanted to create something that was a little bit more styled and also experiment with the idea of using this with another web component library. Okay, I'm not throttling anymore. Looked at some options, found this Vaadin menu bar, which was a nice component. And I just put this example together in a code sandbox. I extended the menu component and then overrode the render method to just, instead of rendering using our own markup, rendering using this custom element that we imported. So now we have this menu here where we can, it's horizontal, there's hover, and then even for the Drupal wiki that has a lot of data, we can see it kind of expand out here. So this was also a pretty small amount of code. I can actually, I think, pop the sandbox open here. And yeah, so the kind of magic here is that we just extended the GWC menu component and then re-implemented, well, a couple things. The render method to use that custom element, and then also it expected data in a slightly different format. So we had to create this, I created this transform method that just takes the data that we get back from the API and puts it in the format that this component expects. And that's all we had to do. Yeah, so I think those are all the things. It's a lot of things, which is great. And, definitely thinking about the future for this project. It seems like there was interest. I'd love to continue the momentum that we have. An idea that I've toyed around with for the future is maybe trying to tackle or focus on a particular component per month, something like that. But yeah, very interested to see where this goes. In general, just the idea of the Drupal community at large maintaining a design system that can be repurposed in a bunch of ways seems like a really powerful concept. So yeah, thanks to everybody who helped out. It was great. That's my piece.
Yoo-hoo! Yay!
Woo! Yeah, thanks everybody.
That was super slick, man.
Yay, it was fun.
And I think also this to have it prepared like this, good job.
Thank you.
I think you're on the top of the list. The only problem is I think you're also in the jury, so you're disqualified for getting any prizes today. Sorry.
It's all good.
No. No, I'm joking. Let's just do a little bit of Q&A. Does anyone have a question to the team that was working on this? Joe is also here on the call, Joe P. that was part of that one, who did the tugboat stuff. So any questions from anyone?
I have like a lot of questions, but I would start with what were your takeaway? When we introduced this general project, so I'm sure like not everything is smooth at the point, because like I myself faced a few problems. So what are the problems that you faced? I would like to know about that, and the challenges and how you solved it in the project, or what's the solution going on?
Specifically for the general project type?
Yeah, general project, and your experience of hosting it on Drupal.org, and that one.
Can I talk about the tugboat thing for a second, Brian?
That'd be great, Joe. Go ahead.
So Brian mentioned this a little already, but the issue I worked on to add the tugboat previews for the general Drupal Web Components project, we did run into some issues with that initially, because all of the existing tugboat QA Docker images, there wasn't an obvious existing tugboat Docker image available that didn't provide like PHP, or there wasn't like a Drupal server or something. I mean, there was an existing node image, but it didn't provide a web server with it. And in order for this project, what we needed was just the ability to serve the built storybook static site artifact, basically. And so we made do by just like using there is just like a generic Apache tugboat image that we used, and then we like in our tugboat configuration actually manually install Node.js as part of like the build each time. So there's definitely room for some improvement with that specifically. But aside from that, like once we figured out the right image to use, it all worked pretty well. Drupal.org wise, I think everything worked kind of as we expected once we figured that piece out.
Yep. Yeah. And in general, I've found the process to be pretty good so far. The one big thing that I wish we could do is automate things. So publishing to Netlify and publishing to NPM, as I understand it, there's no way quite yet to be able to like put a secret in our repository that would make that possible. I think they're working on looking at ways to do that. And one of the core projects does do that. But if we could have things published automatically to NPM and Netlify whenever there's a merge, that would be sweet.
So if I understand correctly, you are talking about CIs, continuous integration, and the tools required.
Yep.
So, but we could still automate the linting and all those things.
Yep.
Are you using
that is great. We have an issue for that, actually. We do have the linting set up. We don't have tests yet. But then when we do have tests, I was thinking we would also run that in CI.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I don't know if you've already thought a lot about that, Brian, but it's unclear to me. I mean, I have almost no experience actually implementing things with Drupal CI, like the Drupal.org CI infrastructure. I know there's a way you can provide like a config file for that, but I'd be curious if like that would even be an appropriate place to run the kinds of tests that you're wanting to build, or if you'd want to use the like Git, like if we could even access. I also don't know if we could access like the GitLab CI via the Drupal.org GitLab instance.
I think it would just be the GitLab CI. That's what the Once project is doing. So that's what I was thinking. But yeah, there are certain permissions that a contrib project doesn't have yet. So we can't do things like store secrets.
I see. Okay, that sounds cool though.
Any more questions about web components, Tugboat, general project, Drupal.org?
Yeah. How was the API?
It was good. Yeah, we haven't really run into any problems. It's been pretty straightforward. We basically, for this component, I think we just kind of initially implemented the fetch method and haven't had to touch it. It's definitely modeled after what was there for the React component, and it also uses that link set menu library that's on NPM. But it's been working really nicely so far.
Awesome.
Okay, I have a question regarding like the project. Again, not regarding the decoupled menu initiative, but the project itself, because I find it really awesome. So the reason is like, I was developing the Svelte menu component, and I realized that I could reuse your project. But one of the friction that I found out was like, the data structure that I would like to have is not in sync with like what you expect in the component. So you saw in the React, you were transforming the data and then feeding it into the component and all. So so do you have any plans for like, making it more generic so that you don't assume a certain things? Like, for example, you would probably like avoid fetching the data itself and expect others to feed the data. So you just give like a clean interface for others to use.
It actually already does that. It's obviously not clear enough. And I think there might be ways that it could be refactored. But if you don't pass in an attribute for a base URL and a menu ID, you can just pass in the menu tree as an object.
Oh, cool.
So
that's not aware of.
So it should be
So
it should be possible to do that. But in general, stuff like that, and there are so many cases like this, and it kind of came up with the styling as well. Like, I think that we as a community, or people who are interested in this project or something similar, the more we can kind of standardize on like what the approach should be and how generic things should be, the more we'll be able to do with something like this.
Personally, I see like your project growing out to be a kind of a design system that could be reused by others. And
yeah, that's absolutely the idea. The best case scenario, if people are interested and this continues to live on, that's exactly what I'd love for it to be.
So what would be the action point now before we go into demoing more? Brian, we would like to maybe put out one action point after this, maybe asking that question though to you directly. How can we now continue contributing on this thing? And what would you like, how are we going to do that? Because we are going to be going offline next week. Offline meaning we are just, we are not in person here meeting at, how should we do it?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing that comes to mind. So first of all, there are other issues in the issue queue. If anybody wants to chip away at that stuff, that's always great. But there are actually two issues, and I'll post them in a second in the chat. There's one for just general feedback, and another kind of surveying like what other components would be useful to build in this project. So I think just any thoughts that people have there, in the near future would be a good way to maybe kind of keep things going or figure out what we could do next.
Cool. So maybe, so we have been doing like this lightning series regularly, or we did it 3-4 times in the Decoupled Menu Initiative. And Brian, maybe we could just like, maybe do once in a while, maybe just meet, because I think like when we meet and talk about things, it has a little bit different dynamic. And we can do a little bit of both being, during our 2 o'clock UTC time, there is the Decoupled Menu Initiative Slack meeting happening. So please come to that one. But there's also happening for everyone who is not available in that time zone. We do it exactly 12 hours later for everyone who is in another time zone. That's more better for that, like in Asia and Australia. So thank you again.
Thank you.
We have maybe 2 other components also that were worked on at least before the hackathon, and maybe something during the hackathon. We have here Shippen that made the Svelte component. Is there anything that you want to share with us, Shippen, about that one?
Yes, but the thing is, like, I didn't actually work on Svelte during the hackathon because I was more into the documentation thing. And also the reason why I didn't work much on it because I saw like Brian Perry, like, working on his project, and that's the one, like, which should be like more, because it's more reusable across. So what I built would be like helping only the Svelte community because it's Svelte components. And and then it was kind of like feature complete, I would say. So in that sense. So yeah, but I could go ahead and demo that.
Show us, please.
Oh, good. Yeah, won't take much time. Let me know if I'm sharing my screen in a bit. Good. Okay.
Yeah, it's coming with.
Because I can't share you and I'm sharing screen because I just have one monitor. So let me take you to the project page, Drupal.org. So thanks, Barry, for motivating me to contribute over and create a general project. So we have a project called Drupal Svelte Component Menu, which is something what like Brian Perry just showcased, but written in Svelte for Svelte. And Svelte, so without much further ado, or whatever you call it, so this is a demo application which is running, which is showcasing how to use a Svelte component. So basically, if you're running a Svelte project, so you would be using it by just importing the menu component, so which is called Drupal Svelte component menu, and then you would be feeding it the data which you get from Drupal, or like the endpoint that we all know Gabe has made available for the hackathon. So yeah. So what this presentation, I guess I'm repeating myself, so I will just skip through it. What it does is it just feeds the data into the menu component, and then it is displayed over here like a normal menu. So if you're using Svelte, what you could also do is place the UI the default one used by the component itself with another one, which is, for example, on the bottom, you could provide a different component, which would be a custom component. Like this could also be a web component written by Brian Perry. So maintained from that module, and you can pass it on to this Svelte component along with the data, so that it is rendered. And for the time being, to fetch another Drupal wiki, I believe this is the correct one. So yeah, if you fetch another menu, so it will render appropriately. So this has two major way of using. One is through feeding the data itself, and another would be just providing the URL of the menu. Like in this case, something like this, like hardcode it, and then it will do the fetching and display the menu. And as you can see in the alternate version, you could pass a custom UI, which would provide you a folder-based navigation in which you can click on the link, and the click to expand is like an icon on the left side of it. So that's it. So that's it. That's pretty much it, what I did. Something I was experimenting upon while working on this project is, okay, let me click on this browse code repository, was running the GitLab CI, and I was able to configure CI to do some sort of linting and some basic tests. So it doesn't do much. And so while doing this, I kind of found that so I was trying to copy the things from one.js project, and noticed that there are some sort of audit and these things being run. So yeah, it inherited that. So the way I configured this was using by adding this GitLab ci.yaml into the project. So as you can see, I inherited from the template, which is being used by the other core project. And it gave me like a few stages, and I just added a couple of mine. So I added this lint part as well as the audit part, and then that's pretty much it. So the one I had not been able to do is like automatically publish to the npm when a release tag is created. So that's why you could see in the CI/CD pipeline that in the last stage, so like once the lint is done and then afterwards the audit is run, in the last stage the release doesn't happen because of the problem we discussed earlier. So would be nice if we could solve that, so that every time like somebody pushes a tag, automatically a release is created in npm, which could be downloaded and used by the others. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Very nice. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, and I will also like to promote another project which I created. Like it's in the general project category. Oh, sorry. Maybe I can just take like wee bit of small. I think I already did it in Decoupled. So it is like a project which actually lives on GitHub, and it is used to, it's a helper library which you can use to make your life simpler when writing filter queries for decoupled applications. Okay, so basically when you are communicating with JSON API, and if you want to do some sort of filtering, so you could use an API, something like this, instead of trying to figure out and concatenate strings. And this is also easier to code review and also understand what you did like a month back. So this, I wrote it for myself, and I find it could be useful for others. So I have created this project and published into npm, and it can be used like this. So at this point, I'm using Drupal.org to make it more to reach out for people who are searching for projects on Drupal.org, because on GitHub I don't get that visibility. And I have created this project just for the people who are using Drupal and communicating with using decoupled application and developing against Drupal. So I believe general project in Drupal.org is the place where it should live. So yeah, I just created it today. So let's get to see how it is going to kick off. So yeah, and with that, I will just wrap up.
Thank you. So question time. Does anyone have a question for Sheben?
I have just a brief comment on publishing to NPM. I believe that if you write to Ryan from Drupal Association, then he is able to add your credentials there and you are able to publish.
I said, wow, that's great.
It's good to know.
Yeah, there has been some discussions about that, I think, so feel free to put that into our Slack channel as well. I think there are some, I'm not up to date of what the status is there. So, but Miro, probably you're giving so feel free to just have that chat, or if you have questions around that, do it on the Slack channel. The DA is of course helping us here extremely much and doing all of the groundwork for this, that we can do this. So thank you, Drupal Association.
Yeah, but I would like to warn people who even though even if Drupal Association or anybody is helping us to put our credentials into GitLab CI, but if you do something wrong, these credentials will be exposed in CI logs. So it's a tricky part. So you should know what you're doing, and otherwise, please get it audited, from a person who understands Docker and how the things are built. so that your credentials won't be exposed to the public. That's it.
So, do we have any other, before we jump into documentation, do we have any other candidates in here that want to demo code or code work? Or just have general questions?
Who's from the React menu component? I was looking forward to see that.
Yeah, I think that's Juan Luis, and he is not here today, so he can, but he is very active in Slack channel. His name is Vulcan NR, I think, and he's working for Anertech. So he's also located in Europe, like you, Shibin, and you can just connect to him on Europe daytime.
Sure. Yeah.
Alrighty, then if there is no more that want to share anything with us in terms of code, then I think we should jump into how are we, like everything that you've done now and showed, that's all great, but how can you start? And where can you find the information? So Joe Schindler and Ryan, Ahmad, and James. We have, and am I missing anyone? Liam also was part, Miro, of course, just trying to see like who I see here. We're all participating and we met every single day. And maybe Joe or Ryan, who wants to show us something that we've done? There's a lot of information. Shipin, can you give somebody a presenting? Like, okay.
Who?
I will say, like, give it to me. I will share it, but I need all of you to talk about all the work that you've done. Thank you.
Actually, you are a moderator, so I don't have to give you a presentation.
Yes, you did. I just got it now.
Buddy, I'm kind of disappointed you didn't make slides like Brian did.
Sorry to have thrown that gauntlet down. My apologies.
I'm also like so competitive that I'm just like a little bit like, why did I not think about this? And Brian even told us that 2 hours ago. I prepared some slides, but it's nothing, but it was really awesome. Okay. So this group of 6-7 people, we met every day at 9 o'clock Germany time, whatever that is in your time zone. And we basically started this document here. And we did a couple of other things as well. And then we started more documents. And I'm just gonna, I think we can just like go through it. But there was one issue that we actually talked about before we jumped into this one here. And if we go to our open social site, and I'm gonna show you here, if you go into all groups, and then you find our group all the way on the bottom, there is a topic here, which is called non-code contribution / documentation. We could add that. And we tried to document, at least to start with, what it was actually that we looked at. So there is here the first topic that we talked about, which is actually an important topic. And I'm going to open that up here. This is actually an issue from you, Joe. Maybe you can just tell us quickly about this issue.
Sure. I was working on trying to improve the documentation for how to create a general project as one of the issues. And in doing so, I've discovered that like the biggest issue isn't that it's not documented, it's that it's impossible to find the page that you need to go to create the project unless you know, like, go to drupal.org/node/add. And so this is an effort to surface links to make it easier for people to find like where to contribute a project, and it applies to not just general project, but modules and themes as well, because it was kind of the same issue. If you didn't know where to go to start a new module project on Drupal.org, it was difficult to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think that there was some comments done here. So firstly, it was done when you started it, but there has also been some comments from this week. So thank you everyone that contributed to this issue. And that was definitely, I think, good discussions, and hopefully you can take that forward. I think this makes a lot of sense, what you've done here. And please do take a look at it. It's issue number 3205001. And after just looking at this together, and just most of the people here actually started to comment on this one, we went and there was a little bit larger issue in our Decoupled menu initiative, which is about like the documentation. So basically not just here's one thing and we can do it and put it in here and we can change something, but it's a little bit more, how are we going to document how you get started with Decoupled Drupal? So we also had discussions about like general like API documentation and all that stuff, but we didn't go further than thinking about how are we going to start and where are we going to document how you start using Decoupled Drupal. And this issue here was created by Theodore, and there were, of course, a couple of discussions here. We also had an FAQ for the Decoupled menu initiative that we found when we were chatting about this yesterday, which actually answers a couple of questions as well, like, you know, why should you rather use this or that, or is there any difference? And there's a couple of whys here, so you can go and check out that in the FAQ document, but that was more related to the Decoupled menu initiative. That was like, why are you creating a menu? And there's questions that we were just getting all the time. So let's look at maybe the issue here, or the document here, which is the starting document. We first of all wanted just to acknowledge everybody who was participating generally in our hackathon. So not just in the documentation part, because, but also like everyone that was participating in general. So if you are, I'm gonna post a link here to this one. So if you, or is it already in? I don't know. So if you have participated and you're not on this list already, then please add your name, because I also want to make sure that we all get credits. So that is part of documentation, is actually to give credits for the work that you've been doing. And what we've done here, we either just put your name or your username in Drupal.org, and if you have a Twitter handle, that's also nice. Sometimes when we send out these photos and we try to show others that we have action here. And that's like part of my job of the Decoupled menu initiative. It's just to make sure that we are talking about what we're doing so others can get interested and know what they should do. So please add it in here. Thank you, everyone who is contributing to this now. So we are going to go a little bit into the spreadsheet. Joe is going to show us hopefully that later. Wow, there's a user journey flow map that Ryan is probably then going to show us. Thank you, Ryan, for that. I'm looking forward to see that. But let's start with the, you know, how many pages is this now? Like, look, it's 14 pages, people. Like, this gets a clap too, right?
Lots of ideas, right?
Wow. 14 pages of documents.
So you should have made slides like 2,900 words, 18,000 characters.
Okay, so where should we start? We're going to be here. So I'm really sorry, everyone. We're going to be here for the next hour telling you everything about documentation. I want to start, and that is maybe what I'm passionate about. And when I'm finished, I hope that somebody is going to take like how we're going to build up that content. So we start with the personas. So we talked through a couple of personas that we think that will need our documentation. We talked about a persona, which is an experienced front-end developer who is interacting with the Drupal API and just has questions. And there was like, you know, we talked this through, and Chipin also had been putting in like some of his in his GitHub, links to all kinds of stuff. Like, what are the things that I think about as a front-end developer when I want to interact with the Drupal API? Course was one thing that we spent a little bit of time of talking about. There's also another topic for that on our open social. Another persona, a Drupal developer. So first it was a front-end developer who is using the API. And now we're talking about a Drupal developer that actually wants to learn how to do a decoupled front-end, or a Drupal developer who's actually working with a front-end team that is doing decoupled front-end. So again, like, you know, understanding what it is that he needs or they need to provide for the person that they are creating this for. And that is also like, you know, how opinionated are we going to be? Are we going to tell people that they should just use the JSON API? Or are we going to be saying like, that is in core, but you also have other options of using GraphQL or REST from Drupal core and whatever it is. So like you can, you know, we had a little bit of discussions of how far are we going to go into this, but we definitely talked about that we are just going to start with at least pointing people to the right places. One persona that we thought was extremely important too is the decision maker, CTO, senior stakeholder, anyone that actually wants to understand if you actually can decouple with Drupal. So imagine being a leader of a technical team, and your experienced developers, they come and they say like, we want to use Drupal and we want to do decoupled front end using web components and doing all this stuff that you're doing. And is that okay, or so on? And then that decision maker, of course, needs to be able to like think about like, ooh, is Drupal, does it have that capability? Are there any case studies like showing that there is maybe weather.com and others that are actually doing it? So like to build up the trust. You know, what are the pros and what are the cons that they have, and so on. And then we talked less about those three, but we still wanted to recognize them, of course. The DevOps engineer, the person who's in charge of deploying the decoupled application. We didn't go into much details about that, but we still like managed to put a couple of things about it. The content creator, understanding like, how is my experience going to be if I'm using like Drupal for my data and for my content, and my backend is, or my front end is being done somewhere else, and is it gonna, you know, can I preview my content? Can I have drafts and so on? And the front-end developer who is just working with HTML and CSS and just, you know, wants to just like, you know, make the components beautiful and all this stuff. So, so that took us into the thinking about the user journey. So, okay, so how is it then going to work? Like, how are you going to, you know, how is it going to be? Like, are we going to put this all into one page? So we spent time on that yesterday. Draw up this beautiful photo. And Joe, maybe you had some good thoughts and things about generally the structure of like the entrance of decoupled Drupal.
Sure. I'm glad that you think that they were good thoughts.
Before you jump in, Joe, I just want to say I have to drop off, pick my kid up from school. But thanks, everybody. Super fun.
Thank you, Brian.
For help. Bye.
I maybe real quick, I think the next thing we kind of did was sort of diving into starting to figure out what the content would look like. And we tried to make this distinction between, or rather, we were like, okay, we have personas. We know we need to write some documentation. If we want to get it done, we need to like define an outline and what the scope of that documentation is, and not just be like, all right, and now start writing it. And so we then kind of clarified this idea of like tutorial documentation that's tutorial, like a how-to guide that provides step-by-step instructions how to walk through something, versus things that are a reference manual. And felt like there is a fairly decent reference manual for things like JSON API on Drupal.org already. And that what we really need to improve is the more getting started how-to guide And that's where we came up with this idea that like, okay, maybe we have sort of 3 different guides. One of them is the like, if you're a decision maker or an evaluator, how do you evaluate Drupal? I think maybe what you end up with there hopefully is some kind of like a bit of explanation of Drupal and decoupled applications, et cetera, and then like a link that somebody can click on to see like this is what the Drupal API looks like in practice, kind of thing. And then the like Badi was saying for personas, we think that there's sort of like a front end developer who's someone else is in charge of the Drupal site and you're just wanting to consume Drupal's API. And then the other persona is like, you are the person who needs to set up Drupal in the API. And we could create 2 guides that people could walk through to get started doing either one of those things. That those guides could be sort of companions to one another. So like the Drupal site that you set up in the backend how-to guide would be the same site that the front-end how-to guide is consuming data from, and then they could kind of like cross-reference one another. And then we started creating an outline for each of those to get some ideas of what are the steps? And then we kept getting hung up on things like authentication, and we gave ourselves permission to say like, this is a thing that we should probably cover, but we're going to punt it to phase 2 and we'll cover that later because we don't know the answer right now. And yeah, and then we started a spreadsheet, which at the moment is pretty empty, but this is based off of, oh, it got filled out a bit. Wanting to be able to, in the future, bring in even more people to help contribute to the documentation here. And we thought that once we have an outline, if we could kind of create issues for each of the different pages in the outline with a brief explanation of what the page should cover, it makes it easier for us to bring in other contributors or hold sprints related to documentation and get people started. And that was the plan. Yeah.
And Ryan and Ahmad or James, anyone that wants to add something to this?
I know I added to this Excel sheet just some of the stuff that we had in the outline. The page titles and things like that are definitely not like dead set. They were just kind of thrown in to start getting it filled in so we knew where things were going to start going. I did start up a user flow chart on Whimsical. If you click that link in the document, you can go to it if you want to, Batty. It's not, it's in the Google Doc.
You mean here?
Yeah, at the top. It's not really filled out yet. But essentially I was trying to visualize more to me what our user flow would look like using the squares as pages and the circles as on-page links. And then we'll basically be able to use these flows to throw the links to the next pages that we're going to flow out. And we can add to it and remove pretty easily. I also want to, it's a work in progress, but I also want to try to make it more accessibility friendly just for the chart sense. But that's kind of all it's at right now.
Very nice. Yeah.
Okay, so
Thank you. Yeah, Ahmad, go for it.
Yeah, I just had a couple of things. I think all of you guys did a wonderful job of mentioning everything. What I was focusing on are still some of the confusions that I have, and some of the things that we were still discussing could be looked upon. And I think one of the major things that I am still thinking about is the perfect landing page for our documentation. Like, it's very good that we have given the link. Now, when the user comes to the landing page, so what kind of feel are we going to give to the user? And I think it's good to mention that we discuss some of the other platforms like Contentful and Prismic, like how they do their own documentations and what we could use from their presentations to add stuff into our documentation. I think that is one of the main questions, the confusions or / questions that I had. And another thing that we discussed was like how Joe also mentioned that we could incorporate some specific cases for them to help, for people to help them in their development process. And I think we discussed like we could take like 1 or 2 specific examples, and like we couldn't, for starters, we cannot cover everything in our documentation, but we could take like 1 or 2 concrete cases and add them in our documentation, so that it's not just a single thing or for a single person or use case, but there are like 2 or 3, but not many. So we could get started with the documentation process for starters. And I think these are some of the questions, outliers that we had. And I thought it would be good to mention the discussion points that are some of the things that are still pending in our discussions. So that's it from now.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, I agree. Everything Ahmed just said is exactly right. And Joe helped us kind of guide a little bit of like, we have to be opinionated on some of these choices so that we can have a getting start guide that by the end you have a functional decoupled site using something that we chose to choose from, or rather than giving a bunch of options and overloading the person going through the path. Especially speaking from my point of view, I'm a Drupal developer that's never done decoupled, but would like to. So like, I'm super intimidated by it. So building confidence of getting something up and running and then starting to build blocks off that would be a great move forward for the documentation. Also, something else we mentioned was like taking like the JS framework, for example, choosing one specific framework to be kind of the option that we have in the demo or the getting started guide, and then allowing other documentation to be written for the other frameworks, like bringing them up as issues in the community so that they can be documented for those other frameworks.
Yeah, that's cool. And that goes kind of hand in hand with an idea that, that we also discussed, I remembered about, having some live code samples. And I know that was something that came up in our survey, like code snippets are something that people definitely want in the documentation. But then along with that, I do think, we need to come up with kind of what are our requirements in order for, anything that we might need from the Drupal Association on their end to enable this kind of documentation. Because, I'm really not too sure that like the documentation as we want it will be, with the current tooling that exists on Drupal.org, I don't think it's available. But I do think that like GitLab pages will enable that. And I think that's something that has been talked about. I'm just not sure where that's at in the process.
So that's correct. I think Tim talked about that in our Q&A, I think that, or Neil Drum, I don't know who it was, but somebody mentioned that from the DA that I think that they are working on that. So I have to say, like, I have not often participated in contribution day in DrupalCon, but like we were in the Decoupled menu initiative. We were really, really fixed on getting the first day, because we were sure that if we could take the first day, that actually something would happen, instead of like being on Friday when then everything has been done and then start our process. So I'm extremely happy because it looks like that worked out, that we fought for the first day. So we got we were even supposed to be at some point on the Monday, I think, like we would have been not having 14 pages, we would then have 24 pages. Which is not necessarily good, because like I'm not so sure if the number of pages is the counter here, it's equality, right?
And I agree with that. Like on having this on the first day, it was nice because in past DrupalCons, having everything on the last Friday, it's like you have a few hours and then that's all the time you have to contribute. So working with you guys through the days was very nice.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like, first of all, also like most of us, we have never. I think that's also something to notice and talk about. Like most of us have never worked together before. Most of us were meeting for the first time this week. Some of us have seen each other. Some of us have like chatted and on the issue queue or something like that. But really, like to be able to get together here and actually, get to know people, and that will only continue in some work in the future. So if we think about an action point from the documentation initiative within the Decoupled menu initiative, I think the documentation initiative is probably per se a separate initiative, which should be called just the Decoupled documentation initiative in many ways. And because it has not, in that sense, so much to do with the menu, it just generally has something to do with how to do things. So I'm confident I'm really happy to continue this work, and I will be trying to push that on the Slack. And anyone that wants to continue, we could also just do regular meetups a little bit earlier in the day, so Ahmad doesn't always have to be in the night.
We also have our Slack meetings too, that I definitely think this needs to be a topic that's on that, every Tuesday on our Slack meetings, for sure.
So how the Slack meeting basically works is that the only thing that I do there is just to put the topics out there. And it means that everybody who is just participating, feel free to say I would like to discuss that, or I would like to take that forward. Either just ping me beforehand or during the meeting. You can also just send me a direct message, or you can create the topic yourself, by putting in the number. So keep on, we need more people to help, and we need more hands to do all this work here. But most of all, it's going to be most difficult to organize it into things to work in. So Joe, I think this sheet there is really good. Thank you for showing us how you were doing that for general documentation. So the user guide.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, so we of course promised some prizes and stuff like that. So now we have to do something. So let us think a little bit about how we can actually figure out how we can get some companies to give this group a swag or something like that. I hope that everyone that participated and is listening here today and participating, put the name, the Drupal.org username here in, and we will follow up on that in some way.
I feel like everybody is a winner here because
that's what I exactly wanted to say.
Yeah, productive and really awesome group, and I really, I'm really glad that I was part of this. But also, I would like to mention Gabe, who is not present here, but he was phenomenal behind the scenes, getting the API ready and all. So yeah, just had to talk about it.
Yes.
Very, very good point. So he provided us with a Drupal instance that is running somewhere there. So actually there would be a live endpoint. And Joe, I think, put in some content in there so that menu would actually have some menu items.
And a really good use case with the Drupal wiki menu.
Yeah.
I was like, what is a really annoyingly large nested navigation structure? And I was like, oh, Drupal.org. I'll just copy that.
I'm so glad we have Joe here.
But Joe, did you copy it? Did you use a tool, or did you create each menu link by yourself?
I just created them each by myself. It didn't take too long. I'm a pretty good copy and paster.
Okay.
It's one of my sweet open source developer skills. I'm good at copying, pasting things from the internet.
That's a good skill to have, right?
Yeah.
So I think we could probably officially stop the recording, but that doesn't mean that we cannot hang out in here and all the stuff. So on behalf of the Decoupled Menu Initiative, thank you everyone. And you are all part of this initiative. I'm going to make sure that everybody gets a credit, and we can maybe organize that somehow, but create an issue on Drupal.org and put the status of the issue and credit the people and all of that. We will make sure that happens.
And if feedback can make it to the people who decided kind of to do this contribution stuff the way they did, I think if anything, what should come out of this is that the opportunity to start the contribution stuff on day one should be given to all projects, and then just highlight those projects each day. Because I agree, I didn't know any of you. I don't work on issues very often. but I feel like I got to know many of you in a really short amount of time. And that's pretty cool. And if we only had today, it would have been totally different.
I agree. And also this the social part. So we've also just been chatting about social things like, you know, like our kids or our families or where we are located, or if it is like night or
Say I've got to wait at that explodes a couple times.
Exactly. So let me just, with those words, Brooke, I think that was a really good one. Let me see if I can end the recording. So there says here, pause recording. There's a plus up here. So I think nobody has tried that before. So let's see. I really hope it works.
Hope it was recording all the time.
Yeah, so
it does have
are
a
you sure
little
you
thing
want
at
to
the top.
pause? I said that